Hey guys, tonight we slip behind vermilion walls, where dawn comes not with a gentle alarm clock but with the boom of bronze drums echoing across courtyards glistening in the morning dew. You stir awake on a lacquered bed, curtains embroidered with cranes shifting in the faint breeze. Servants already pad across the polished floor, their steps soft but their timing merciless. You sit up, hair undone, eyes heavy, and the day begins whether you're ready or not. And spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't last a single sunrise here, because once the palace clock starts ticking, it doesn't stop for comfort. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're listening right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The room still smells faintly of incense from last night's prayers, mixed with the sharp scent of cold water basins being set down by maids. You shiver as they begin the washing ritual, face rinsed, teeth scrubbed with fragrant twigs, hair combed out into long dark rivers. Mainstream fact: court concubines followed strict routines each morning, with hygiene and grooming checked not just for cleanliness but for signs of health and discipline. Historians still argue whether this was primarily for genuine medical care or for maintaining appearances of perfection, but either way, skipping wasn't an option. You're hardly finished drying your face when another servant kneels to present the attendance register. Every concubine, from favored ladies to those so lowly they might never glimpse the emperor, must appear on the day's roll call. A slip could mean punishment. Quirky tidbit: some palaces even kept wooden or jade name plaques stored in drawers, swapped daily to indicate who was present. Ill, or absent, bureaucracy tucked into every layer of silk. Outside, the courtyard buzzes with life. Officials pace with scrolls, eunuchs rattle off schedules, and somewhere a rooster crows far too late. It's already drowned out by the metallic clang of palace bells. You stand in line, waiting your turn, adjusting your robe so it doesn't drag across damp stone. One woman coughs and earns a disapproving glare from a supervisor. You fight the urge to laugh and instead murmur joke one to yourself. Imagine being judged for sneezing louder than the gong. Once checked in, you're herded back toward your quarters, where hairdressers wait with trays of combs, pins, and powders. The early morning is a production line of beauty. And you're the product. No breakfast until the hair is bound in proper coils, no silk gown until your nails are inspected for neatness. You yawn, stomach growling, and the maid scolds you with a look. From the window, you glimpse the rising sun spilling across golden roofs, every tile glinting like scales. The palace feels alive, breathing, its arteries filled with women like you, waking, washing, presenting themselves for another day of waiting, surviving, perhaps scheming. Joke 2 bubbles in your head: Netflix and chill doesn't exist here, it's more like incense and inspection. By the time the sun clears the horizon, you're polished, perfumed, and hungry. Breakfast is finally served: bowls of rice, pickled greens, maybe a sliver of steamed fish if the kitchen favors your rank today. You savor every bite, aware that meals can shift with politics. Mainstream fact again: the imperial kitchen was a massive bureaucracy itself, with dishes assigned by rank, season, and even medical prescription. Historians still argue whether concubines received fair nutrition or if food was often used as another tool of control. Bellies filled, faces painted, names checked, the concubines dispersed to lessons, duties, or endless waiting. You stretch your arms, feeling the weight of embroidered silk settle like chains. The day has only begun, and already you're tired. Joke 3 murmurs as you shuffle toward the next hall: all this fuss, and I haven't even seen the emperor yet. The courtyard empties after roll call, but the true sorting of the day begins at the gates and tally boards. You shuffle toward a pavilion where eunuchs stand beside racks of wooden and jade plaques, each etched with names and ranks. A glance at those tokens tells you everything: who eats well, who waits, who rises, and who sinks. Mainstream fact: the imperial harem was arranged in a ladder of rank, with the empress at the top, then noble consorts, pure consorts, and a descending chain of ladies, attendants, and maids. Each rung came with precise privileges, silks, servants, food portions, even the right to ride in carriages. Historians still argue whether this structure was rigidly enforced every day or flexed depending on politics and personalities. But in either case, hierarchy shaped every breath of palace life. You step up to see where your plaque has been slotted. Today, you're lower than yesterday, someone else's name gleams in a higher drawer. A reminder that favor is a moving target. Quirky tidbit: in some dynasties, especially during the Ming, plaques of women eligible for the emperor's company were shuffled like cards each evening, a bizarre lottery of intimacy. Imagine your future hinging on whether a eunuch had butterfingers. As the eunuch reads out the order, women bow or pale. One lady beams, her token moved up a tier. Another scowls as hers slips down. You try to keep your expression neutral, though inside you're muttering joke 1. Basically this is the world's worst version of a leaderboard. The Empress herself presides invisibly over all this. Her title isn't just ceremonial, she oversees discipline, rituals, and harmony among the concubines. Mainstream fact again, some empresses wielded enormous influence, punishing rivals or promoting allies through these daily tallies. Historians still argue whether their control truly checked the emperor's whims or merely managed the fallout. Either way, her shadow stretches across every jade plaque. After the readings, you line up for assignment. Higher-ranked ladies drift toward luxurious halls, where lessons in poetry and calligraphy await. Lower ranks, like yours, may be sent to tend the gardens, stitch garments, or simply wait in your quarters, your status echoing in the silence of neglect. You glance at the grand gates where palace messengers enter and exit. Only certain women may pass through them, their tokens permitting temporary freedom for processions or festivals. You're confined, your world bounded by walls painted in imperial red. Joke 2 whispers as you watch the doors close: if freedom comes on a wooden plaque, I'd better start carving my own. The eunuchs disperse the plaques. Sliding drawers shut with a thud that sounds final. For today, your fate is sealed. You can already sense how it ripples outward: fewer servants attending you, fewer dishes at mealtime, fewer chances to be seen, and yet, behind every tally board lies opportunity. You've heard stories of women rising from obscurity to high rank through wit, talent, or sheer luck. Some wrote poems that caught the emperor's eye, others simply managed to be in the right place when fortune smiled. Quirky tidbit again, court records note that sometimes even the act of fainting at the right moment during an audience could spark attention. Imagine training for years just to master dramatic swooning. You clutch your robe tighter. Returning to your quarters with a mix of resignation and faint defiance. Joke 3 forms as you slump onto a stool. Forget strategy manuals, someone should write How to Win Friends and Influence Eunuchs. The day stretches on, your rank weighing heavier than silk. Tomorrow, the plaques may change again. But for now, you're trapped in the place assigned to you, watching the game unfold like a scroll you can't edit. Back in your quarters, the air already hums with the clatter of combs and the scent of sandalwood oil. Dressing is not a quick slip into fabric here, it's a ritual layered with meaning, a performance that announces your rank before you ever open your mouth. You sit patiently on a low stool while 2 maids unfurl rolls of silk, colors gleaming in the morning light. Mainstream fact: court attire in imperial China followed strict codes. Certain shades, like bright yellow, were reserved exclusively for the emperor, while others were limited to empresses and consorts of high rank. Historians still argue whether women at the lower levels had freedom to improvise within these boundaries or whether every stitch was inspected. But one truth remains: your clothes speak before you do. The maid holds up a robe dyed in soft green, safe and uncontroversial. She layers it over an undergown of pale linen, then cinches it with a sash embroidered with phoenixes, small ones, mind you, because larger birds are symbols only the empress may flaunt. You raise your arms, sleeves cascading like waves, and feel the weight settle on your shoulders. Hair comes next. A second maid sets down a tray of pins, combs, and ornaments, jade butterflies, gold blossoms, carved ivory. Quirky tidbit: some hairstyles were so elaborate they required wire frames or padded buns to hold their shape, turning women's heads into small architectural wonders. You brace yourself as your scalp is tugged, twisted, and lacquered with scented paste until it shines like black glass. Perfume follows, tiny pouches of musk and clove tucked into your sleeves, a dab of floral oil behind your ears. The room fills with fragrance sharp enough to drown the mustiness of stone walls. One maid coughs discreetly, and you think joke one, I smell less like a flower and more like the entire garden market exploded. Once dressed, you're inspected. A eunuch eyes the hem of your robe, the polish of your hairpins, even the angle of your sash. A wrinkle earns a frown, too much jewelry, a warning glance. Mainstream fact again, even accessories were regulated, with ivory or gold permitted only to certain ranks. Historians still argue how rigorously eunuchs enforced these rules, but judging by your sweating palms, enforcement feels very real. At last you're deemed presentable. Breakfast dishes are brought, but even the food reflects your station, steamed buns on a plain lacquer tray instead of porcelain with gilded rims. You take a bite, chewing slowly, thinking of how even a pastry whispers your place in the hierarchy. Joke 2 bubbles up as you sip tea: if status were measured in dumplings, I'd still be stuck at appetizer. Across the courtyard, higher-ranked ladies parade in gowns of silk gauze and embroidered brocade, their hair glinting with pearls. You watch from a distance, both admiring and calculating. A wrong color, a misplaced pin, even an overlong train can trigger whispers that spread like wildfire. Quirky tidbit again, during certain dynasties, palace women rotated seasonal wardrobes dictated by imperial decree, sometimes changing fabrics every 10 days to match the calendar. Imagine hauling trunks of clothing just because the moon shifted. You sigh, stroking your sleeve, grateful your robe will last at least a month before regulations change. Finally, the maids hand you a mirror polished from bronze. Your reflection shimmers faintly, distorted at the edges, but enough to see the transformation. You look serene, composed, fragrant, and delicate, though inside you're hungry, restless, and already planning how to keep your sash from slipping when you bow later. Joke 3 escapes as you set down the mirror. Honestly, with this much lacquer and perfume, I'm less a concubine and more a heavily disguised candle. The dressing ritual complete, you rise, silk whispering at your ankles. The day's lessons await, and in this palace, appearances are only the first battle. You step into the hall where the air already thrums with plucked strings and the soft rasp of brushes across paper. Lessons fill your morning, not because anyone expects you to become a great scholar or a traveling performer, but because grace is currency here, and you can't afford to run out. A maid guides you to your zither, its lacquered surface gleaming like dark water. Your fingers hover above the strings, nails freshly polished for this. Mainstream fact: concubines were often trained in the chin or pipa, instruments prized for their refinement. Court chronicles note that musical skill could earn favor just as much as beauty. Historians still argue whether this training was purely ornamental or if it genuinely gave women influence. But either way, a wrong note can cost more than pride. You pluck, stumble, try again. The sound floats delicate at first, then jagged as your nerves betray you. A tutor sighs, reminding you to breathe, to let your wrist glide. You inhale incense, exhale frustration, and manage a passable melody. A few heads turn, maybe, just maybe, you'll survive this session without humiliation. Joke 1 flickers, my fingers hurt, but at least the zither isn't grating me. When music ends, calligraphy begins. Brush in hand, you copy characters onto scrolls of pale paper, the ink bleeding like black silk. Each stroke must be fluid, elegant, alive. A blotch earns a correction, too shaky a line. A warning glance. Mainstream fact again, literacy among concubines varied, but many were taught at least basic brushwork to pen poems, letters, or religious sutras. Historians still argue whether these writings were genuine self-expression or carefully scripted displays for patrons, but the discipline of it remains real. Beside you, a more talented lady crafts a poem about spring blossoms. She whispers it to a eunuch who will likely spread it as a tidbit of charm. Quirky tidbit, some women slipped coded messages into poems, weaving complaints or hopes beneath flowery metaphors. To an untrained ear, it was nature verse; to an insider, a quiet act of rebellion. Your afternoon lesson is dance. Shoes off, sleeves long, you step in rhythm with the drumbeat. The floor creaks under dozens of feet, swishing silk like waves in tide. You try to hold your posture, wrists floating like willow branches. But one misstep sends your sleeve into your neighbor's face. She stumbles, the instructor scolds, and you blush crimson. Joke 2 muttered through clenched teeth, "Great, I just invented slapstick ballet." Still, practice continues. You bow, spin, freeze, learning to become ornament and shadow at once. It isn't just entertainment, it's theater of survival. If called upon to perform before higher eyes, failure can stain you for months. When the lessons end, you're drained. Fingers ache from strings, shoulders stiff from brushwork, legs trembling from dance. Yet you smile, bow, and thank your tutors. Mainstream fact again, training wasn't just about skills but about discipline, proof you could follow rules, endure tedium, and embody restraint. Historians still argue whether the system produced artistry or merely conformity, but sitting here with sore feet, you suspect it was both. You leave the hall and catch sight of an older concubine humming softly as she sketches plum blossoms in the courtyard dust with her slipper. Her quiet confidence radiates more power than your hours of practice. You wonder if grace is less about technique and more about the ease that comes with survival. Joke 3 whispers as you limp back to your quarters, "If elegance means sore feet, then I'm practically the empress already." The lessons have ended, but etiquette still waits to trip you. And in this palace, tripping is not a metaphor you want to test. By the time the lessons end, you'd think you've earned a nap. But no, your afternoon is devoted to etiquette drills, the invisible threads that hold this world together. You're herded into a side hall where eunuchs and older attendants line the walls, ready to catch every flicker of impropriety. Mainstream fact, in imperial harems, protocol was codified to the point of obsession. How deep you bowed, where your gaze rested, and even the tilt of your sleeve were rehearsed. Historians still argue whether these rules were uniformly enforced or more selectively applied depending on politics, but one thing is certain, etiquette wasn't optional, it was armor. You practice bowing before an imagined empress, lowering yourself until your forehead nearly touches the mat. Rise too quickly and you look arrogant, too slowly, and you appear sluggish. You're corrected on how to fold your hands, right over left, fingers aligned, never fidgeting. One attendant taps your elbow with a fan when it strays. Quirky tidbit, manuals from the Tang and later dynasties included entire chapters on gestures, detailing everything from how to hold a wine cup to how to adjust a hairpin in public without appearing vain. Speech drills come next. You repeat set phrases, humble greetings, graceful thanks, self-deprecating apologies. Each must be delivered in a voice that is soft yet clear, humble yet articulate. The instructor snaps at a girl whose tone was too cheerful, as if joy itself might be mistaken for insolence. Joke 1 flickers in your head, so basically, the goal is to sound polite while sounding like you don't exist. Then there are spatial rules. You're shown where to stand depending on rank, never too close to higher women, never too far to seem aloof. You rehearse entering a hall, walking in measured steps, sleeves draped just so. You even learn when not to breathe too audibly during ceremonies. It's exhausting, but one slip can ripple into whispers that last for weeks. Mainstream fact again, palace records describe cases where minor breaches of etiquette, like wearing the wrong seasonal robe or sitting before being invited, led to demotion or punishment. Historians still argue whether this was genuinely about respect or merely a tool for rivals to weaponize against each other. From the nervous looks around you, you suspect the latter. At one point, you kneel beside a tray of teacups, practicing the art of offering drink. The cup must be angled just right, your fingers never brushing the rim. You bow slightly as you extend it, eyes lowered. You whisper joke to yourself, funny how giving tea here feels scarier than handing a sword to a general. You also review taboos, words never spoken, objects never touched. Writing the emperor's name. Forbidden. Stepping on thresholds. Bad luck. Whistling at night. Said to summon spirits. Quirky tidbit again, in some courts, even mentioning fire outside of rituals was considered ominous. Imagine trying to warn of smoke while carefully rephrasing it into auspicious warmth is spreading. By late afternoon, your knees ache from kneeling, your back stiff from bowing. The instructor dismisses you with a warning, remember, the body is watched more than the face. You shuffle out, drained, wondering if you'll ever be able to move naturally again. Walking back through the courtyard, you pass a group of new arrivals rehearsing their bows. Their movements are clumsy, their whispers anxious. You stifle a laugh, remembering your own first attempts, and joke 3 surfaces. If etiquette were a sport, we'd all lose points just for breathing. The sun tilts westward, shadows stretching across vermilion walls. You've survived another gauntlet of invisible rules. Tomorrow, the drills will repeat. And tomorrow, one mistake could mean the difference between rising in favor, or vanishing into silence. Your back still aches from etiquette drills when the bell for meals rings. Relief floods you, finally, food. But dining here is no simple pleasure, it's another system of control. You file into the dining hall where bowls and trays are already arranged in precise order, each portion a mirror of your standing. Mainstream fact, meals for concubines were carefully regulated. Higher-ranked women enjoyed delicacies, steamed duck, fine teas, exotic fruits, while those of lower rank were served plainer fare of rice, greens, or millet gruel. Historians still argue whether these meals were nutritionally sufficient or deliberately modest to keep women dependent on imperial favor, but either way. The hierarchy was edible. You sit on a low stool, receiving a bowl of rice, pickled cabbage, and thin broth. You force a smile, though your eyes wander to a noble consort's tray of honey cakes and lychees. A maid discreetly pours your tea, herbal, bitter, meant as much for health as for taste. Quirky tidbit, palace kitchens often worked with court physicians to tailor diets according to season and balance of elements. Too much heat in summer. Out go the lamb dishes. Winter chills. In comes ginger and wine, a physician makes his rounds, checking pulses at wrists. His fingers are cool, his face unreadable. He murmurs about your energy being sluggish, prescribes chrysanthemum tea. Joke 1 slips into your mind, maybe the real cure would be fewer etiquette lessons and more naps. Rumors drift across the tables like steam. One woman claims a special tonic has been delivered to the empress, brewed with rare ginseng said to add years of life. Another whispers about a rival who fainted after drinking medicated soup. You sip your plain broth more cautiously, aware that in this world, food can heal, or harm. Mainstream fact again, poisoning was a real fear in courts, leading to elaborate precautions, tasters, sealed jars, and layers of kitchen supervision. Historians still argue how common actual poisonings were versus the paranoia of them, but the fear alone shaped how every bite was eaten. After the meal, smaller trays arrive with medicinals. You're handed a decoction of sour roots, thick as mud, meant to balance the humors and maintain beauty. You gulp it down, grimacing, and mutter joke 2, if youth tastes like this, maybe wrinkles aren't so bad. Some concubines visit physicians directly, their ailments recorded on bamboo slips. Others sip rare cordials reserved for higher ranks. Packed with deer antler, bird's nest, or pearls ground into powder. Quirky tidbit again, pearl powder was believed to brighten complexion, though some suspected it was just expensive chalk. You rub your cheek absent-mindedly, hoping no one notices you haven't sparkled yet. Back in your quarters, servants tidy away trays. Your belly is full but unsatisfied, your tongue still coated with bitterness. You stretch out on the bed, drowsy from herbs, and hear laughter drifting in from a neighboring hall. You imagine the noble consort savoring her honey cakes, and your envy is sharper than any ginger. As you drift, you realize meals aren't just nourishment, they're lessons. Every bowl teaches you where you stand. Every sip reminds you of what you lack. And every tonic whispers that survival isn't just about beauty or wit, it's also about what your stomach can endure. Joke 3, whispered into your pillow, if the emperor ever wonders why we fight, tell him it's over the last dumpling. The day drifts toward evening, and with it comes the most delicate ritual of all, the summons. Whispers ripple through the halls as eunuchs shuffle plaques, selecting names for the emperor's company. You sit stiff-backed, pretending not to care, though your pulse betrays you. Mainstream fact, concubines chosen for the night followed strict procedures, bathing, dressing, and being escorted to the emperor's quarters. The selection itself varied by dynasty, sometimes a name was drawn from Jade plaques, sometimes chosen by direct command. Historians still argue whether emperors truly randomized these encounters or always leaned toward favorites, but for the women involved, ritual mattered more than romance. Your maid hurries in, whispering your name. You've been summoned. At once the world narrows to urgency. You're stripped of your day robes, hustled into the bathhouse where steaming tubs wait, scented with rose petals and sandalwood. Quirky tidbit, some dynasties required women to bathe fully before every summons, both for hygiene and as a symbolic purification. You sink into the water, nerves prickling hotter than the steam. After the bath, attendants dust your skin with rice powder, weave your hair into simpler knots, and slip you into night robes of pale silk. Jewelry is minimal, perfume subtle, the goal isn't glamour but serenity. You glance at the mirror and joke one under your breath, great. I look like a porcelain doll who hasn't slept in 3 years. An eunuch knocks, signaling time. You're wrapped in a robe, guided by torchlight through shadowed corridors. The silence is immense, only your footsteps and the shuffle of escorts. The eunuch carries your plaque ahead, a symbol that your presence is official, recorded. Mainstream fact again, the journey itself was ceremonial. Concubines were often carried or escorted to prevent outside contact, ensuring legitimacy of heirs. Historians still argue whether this practice was about preventing scandal or simply reinforcing control, but either way, it turned intimacy into bureaucracy. At the threshold, you bow deeply, then wait as protocol demands. If admitted, you step quietly across the floor, eyes lowered. No chatter, no sudden movement. You are presence, not personality. Joke 2 floats in your chest. Imagine dating where the small talk is outlawed and paperwork comes first. The evening unfolds in silence heavy with rules. You know every gesture will be remembered by eunuchs. Recorded in registers, even whispered among rivals. And you know tomorrow, whether favored or forgotten, your name will move again on the jade boards. Returning to your quarters later, the hallways seem endless. Lamps glow like watchful eyes. You slip back into your bed, exhausted more by protocol than anything else. Quirky tidbit again, in some dynasties, concubines summoned at night were required to leave at dawn, carried back in blankets to prove they hadn't seen anyone else. You imagine the absurdity and mutter joke 3, nothing says romance like being delivered like laundry. The summons has ended, and with it another night where favor is currency, and silence is survival. Morning comes with the clatter of sandals in the corridor, eunuchs hustling between chambers, voices sharp as whip cracks. You've barely rubbed the sleep from your eyes before a maid whispers, best be kind to the doorkeepers today. You know what she means. The eunuchs, keepers of doors, registers, and secrets, are the quiet arbiters of your daily fate. Mainstream fact: eunuchs in imperial China held enormous power inside the palace. As intermediaries between the emperor and the harem, they controlled communication, schedules, even which concubine's plaque was presented for selection. Historians still argue whether eunuchs were loyal servants or opportunistic manipulators, but one truth stands: without their favor, you were invisible, so you start small. A gift of embroidered handkerchiefs, a smile when a register is checked, a whispered poem slipped into a sleeve. Quirky tidbit: some eunuchs collected gifts so shamelessly that they had whole storerooms of trinkets, fans, jade pendants, even jars of honey. They joked that their treasures outshone the consorts. You approach one at the corridor gate, bow politely, and murmur thanks for yesterday's care. He smirks, tucks the silk ribbon you offer into his sleeve, and notes your name with a flourish. Favor banked, at least for now. Joke one whispers in your mind: basically, I'm speed dating my way through customer service reps. By midday, gossip flows like a second currency. Eunuchs pass messages faster than letters, their words carrying weight. Who fainted in the dance hall, who quarreled over hairpins, who earned the empress's nod, all of it reaches your ears through their lips. Mainstream fact again: eunuchs often acted as informants, not only to concubines but to ministers and emperors, shaping politics with whispers. Historians still argue whether eunuchs abused this role or if concubines themselves pushed them into it, but either way, gossip became weaponized intelligence. One eunuch leans close, murmuring a warning about a rival planning to present a gift at tonight's meal. You nod solemnly, hiding your racing thoughts. It's a reminder that alliances here aren't sealed with oaths, they're traded in secrets. Still, every favor has a cost. Too much generosity, and you look desperate. Too little, and you fade into neglect. You balance carefully, offering gifts that are thoughtful but not lavish, thanks that sound warm but not manipulative. Joke 2 slips out under your breath as you hand over a painted fan: one more bribe, and I'll need a part-time job to fund it. Later, back in your quarters, your maid smirks knowingly. She's seen this dance before. Quirky tidbit again: some concubines wrote coded messages into embroidery given to eunuchs, ensuring a trail of influence while pretending it was just art. You trace the stitched peonies on your handkerchiefs and wonder who else plays this hidden game. By evening, you've secured nods from 3 eunuchs and sidelong glances from rivals who noticed. Your day wasn't about beauty or performance, it was about diplomacy in miniature, all conducted through the gatekeepers of whispers. As you finally close your door, exhausted, you murmur joke 3, forget the emperor: if I really want to survive here, I should just marry a eunuch. The sun tilts toward afternoon, and the palace falls into that strange quiet where time stretches, heavy and slow. When you're not summoned, not rehearsing bows, not bribing eunuchs with handkerchiefs and fans, you're left with the hardest enemy of all: boredom. You sit in your quarters, sleeves spilling like waterfalls across the table, brush poised above blank paper. Mainstream fact: many concubines passed the long hours with calligraphy, embroidery, painting, or composing poetry. These arts weren't just hobbies, they were proof of refinement, tokens of worth, sometimes even quiet weapons of self-expression. Historians still argue whether the works that survive were genuinely personal or curated propaganda later copied into anthologies. But the habits of daily creation filled endless hours. You dip the brush, stroke characters slowly onto the page. Each one whispers of longing or beauty, though in truth you're writing to keep your hands from fidgeting. You set the poem aside, knowing someone, maybe a maid, maybe a eunuch, might read it later, and every word could be twisted into a rumor. Quirky tidbit: some women sewed hidden verses into embroidery, messages only revealed when the cloth was carefully unfolded. Imagine an innocent pillowcase carrying a quiet protest. You glance at the needlework in your lap and smile at the thought. Joke 1 mutters in your mind: cross-stitch meets secret code, basically the palace version of texting under the table. Outside, the garden calls. You step beneath pavilions where bamboo sways, koi ripple the ponds, and caged songbirds chatter like gossiping courtiers. You sketch plum blossoms in the margins of your scroll, inhaling damp earth and incense drifting from a shrine. The beauty is breathtaking, but it is also a cage. Sometimes you trade poems with other women, verses folded into fans, exchanged with smiles that may or may not be sincere. Mainstream fact again, poetry circles thrived in palaces, with women creating verses that later entered the canon. Historians still argue whether these were spontaneous acts of artistry or carefully staged performances to curry favor. Perhaps both. The hours stretch. You pluck at the zither idly, the same 3 notes repeating until your maid begs you to stop. You laugh, joke too sliding out. At this point, I think even the fish are judging my playlist. When twilight drapes itself over the courtyards, lanterns flicker to life. Boredom softens into melancholy. You think of families outside the palace, of marketplaces buzzing with voices, of lives where a woman might walk a street without permission. But here, your path is embroidery threads, ink strokes, and shadows on vermilion walls, and yet, creativity becomes its own rebellion. Each brushstroke is a whisper of yourself preserved, each stitched blossom a stubborn refusal to vanish. You tuck your scroll into a chest, hide your embroidery in a sleeve, and wonder if someday, someone will read them and know you were more than just a name on a jade plaque. Joke 3 drifts as you snuff the lamp. If I ever escape, I'm opening a tea house called the Bored Concubine. The night deepens. And boredom fades into sleep, another day marked not by triumphs but by quiet survival. Festival days arrive like unexpected breezes through a shuttered room. The palace, usually bound by routine and whispers, suddenly hums with color, music, and laughter. You find yourself swept into rehearsals for pageants, theater, and processions, where every concubine becomes both audience and performer. Mainstream fact, imperial court staged elaborate entertainments for seasonal festivals, the Lantern Festival, New Year, the Mid-Autumn Moon Rites. Concubines and court ladies prepared dances, skits, and recitals to amuse the emperor and higher consorts. Historians still argue whether these performances were primarily for genuine enjoyment or subtle demonstrations of loyalty and hierarchy. But either way, they punctuated the monotony with spectacle. You're fitted into a costume dyed crimson, embroidered with gold thread, sleeves so long you could probably sweep the courtyard just by raising your arms. Quirky tidbit, some performances used masks, painted with exaggerated expressions to depict gods, demons, or comic characters. Wearing one meant you could hide behind painted wood, speaking freely in ways you never could unmasked. You slip on a mask shaped like a grinning lion, and for once, your smile doesn't have to be perfect, it's painted on. The rehearsals stretch for hours. You sway in practice steps, wave your sleeves in arcs, and recite lines from a play about a legendary empress who outsmarted her rivals. You try to keep your voice steady, though inside you're laughing at the irony. Joke 1 dances into your mind. Ah yes, nothing like reenacting palace intrigue while living inside actual palace intrigue. When night falls, lanterns bloom across the courtyards, red, green, and gold, shaped like fish, lotuses, even dragons. Their glow paints the walls in firelight, and the emperor's arrival sends ripples of silence through the crowd. Performances begin, dancers twirl in glittering silk, musicians strike the opening chords. Actors in masks strut across the stage. Mainstream fact again, theater in the palace wasn't just entertainment, it often carried subtle political messages, reinforcing virtues like loyalty, obedience, and harmony. Historians still argue whether concubines truly grasped the coded messages or simply enjoyed the pageantry, but watching the masked actors wink and grin, you suspect everyone understands more than they admit. Your turn comes. You step forward, sleeves flowing, mask grinning. The drums thrum in your chest, the flutes trill, and you dance in precise patterns, a human ornament gliding through ritual. The audience claps softly, measured and polite. Whether they're pleased or not. You cannot tell. Afterward, you slip backstage, mask in hand, sweat trickling down your spine. Other women gossip quietly, some radiant with praise, others sulking over mistakes. You smile faintly, relieved you didn't trip over your sleeves. Joke 2 tumbles out in a whisper, if survival were scored, I'd give myself a solid 6 out of 10. Later, you join the lantern walk. The courtyards glow like rivers of stars, each woman carrying a light. Reflections shimmer in the ponds, fireflies dance in the shadows. For one night, the palace feels almost magical, more festival than fortress. You savor the illusion, even knowing it will vanish with dawn. Quirky tidbit again, some festivals included riddles tied to lanterns, with prizes for clever answers. You squint at one, what has no mouth but speaks. And grin. Your answer, eunuch gossip. You keep it to yourself, of course, but the joke makes the lantern shine brighter. As the night winds down, you return to your quarters, silk damp with sweat, hair tangled, lantern extinguished. The walls close in again, but the echo of drums lingers in your chest. Joke 3 flickers as you collapse onto your bed, well, at least tonight I was allowed to trip in costume instead of etiquette class. Tomorrow will return to silence, but tonight you lived under lantern light. The lanterns are extinguished, the costumes folded away, and the festival's glow dissolves into the gray rhythm of ordinary days. But beneath that stillness, another theater continues, politics behind silk screens. You quickly learn that power in the harem isn't about who dances most gracefully, it's about who whispers most carefully. Mainstream fact, while officials and scholars shaped policy outside, palace women could influence decisions through subtle suggestions, requests, or alignments with powerful eunuchs and ministers. Some empresses and favored consorts even sponsored appointments or steered imperial projects. Historians still argue whether these women wielded direct power or only nudged outcomes. But court records are full of their names in the margins of politics. You sit with a higher-ranked consort in her perfumed chamber, sipping chrysanthemum tea. She asks casually whether you've seen the new governor's tribute of jade carvings. The question isn't really about jade, it's about whether you know who sent it, and whether you'll repeat her opinion to the right ears. Every conversation is a chessboard. Joke 1 flickers in your head, forget Go or Mahjong, this is the palace's favorite board game, and losing costs more than points. Quirky tidbit, some women sponsored Buddhist sutra copyings or temple restorations, pious acts that doubled as political gestures, signaling alliances with religious or scholarly factions. You consider adding your name to such a project, not for faith alone, but to appear loyal to a rising trend. Later, you overhear eunuchs murmuring about petitions waiting on the emperor's desk. One mentions a lady who praised a certain general's virtues during dinner. Days later, that general is promoted. Coincidence? Or another stitch in the tapestry of quiet influence? Mainstream fact again, historians record moments where a single word from a favored woman swayed imperial moods. Yet historians still argue whether these anecdotes were exaggerated moral lessons written by later scholars or reflections of genuine female influence. You wonder which version you're living. You begin practicing your own subtlety, praising a festival performance that happened to flatter the empress's clan, admiring a painting donated by a minister whose policies need support. Never too blatant, never too obvious. Like embroidery, each thread must vanish into the pattern. Of course, politics carries risk. One misplaced comment can sound like criticism. One alliance too strong can make you a target. Joke 2 drifts through your head as you rehearse your lines in the mirror. Honestly, it feels less like politics and more like trying not to get voted off a very dangerous reality show. Sometimes, you dream of speaking plainly, of saying what you really think about governors, eunuchs, or even the emperor's whims. But then you remember the stories whispered in the corridors, women exiled for careless words, rivals demoted to silent chambers, names erased from the records. Quirky tidbit again, some concubines, stripped of titles, were forced to live out their days as anonymous servants within the same palace they once ruled. That thought chills more than winter wind, as dusk deepens. You sit by the window, brush in hand, copying verses while your mind drifts over the day's conversations. The koi ripple below, lanterns flicker, and you realize that survival isn't about beauty or even talent. It's about staying in the game without being seen moving the pieces. Joke 3 slips out as you set down the brush. If Machiavelli had been born here, he'd still be taking etiquette lessons. The night grows heavy, and tomorrow will bring new whispers. Behind silk screens, the game never ends. The palace looks serene from the outside, red walls, quiet gardens, lanterns glowing in order. But inside, danger lurks in the smallest shadows. Rivalries sharpen like needles, punishments hover like storm clouds, and you learn quickly that survival is less about beauty and more about avoiding disaster. Mainstream fact: concubines lived under strict curfews and surveillance. Breaking rules, like speaking out of turn, leaving quarters unpermitted, or even wearing colors reserved for higher ranks, could lead to demotion, confinement, or exile. Historians still argue whether these punishments were consistently applied or used selectively by powerful rivals, but the threat was always present. Today, you watch as a fellow concubine is reprimanded for arriving late to roll call. Her hair is cut short, an act of deep humiliation, stripping away a symbol of femininity. She weeps silently as eunuchs lead her away. Quirky tidbit: in some dynasties, shaved or cut hair was punishment for women in the harem, echoing Buddhist nunhood, but here it wasn't about piety, it was about shame. You shiver, fingers instinctively reaching for your carefully pinned coils. Rumors churn. Someone's gift to a eunuch was deemed too extravagant, bribery disguised too poorly. Another whispered a careless complaint about the empress and now scrubs kitchens in silence. Joke 1 flickers in your chest, basically. One wrong sentence here is like hitting reply all to the entire empire. At night, you're reminded of the penalties for jealousy. A lady caught spreading slander may be confined to a silent room, a chamber with no attendants, no conversation, only meals slid through a door. Days there can unravel even the strongest mind. Mainstream fact again: exile to outer palaces or even execution was possible for grave offenses, though many punishments stopped short of death, leaving women alive but erased. Historians still argue whether these measures were meant as deterrents or tools of political cleansing. You remember a story told in whispers: a concubine accused of witchcraft, her quarters searched for cursed dolls or talismans. Whether real or planted, the evidence sealed her fate. Quirky tidbit: accusations of sorcery were sometimes leveled during power struggles, turning incense burners and embroidery dolls into evidence. You glance at your sewing kit nervously, half expecting it to betray you. Every gesture feels fraught. A compliment might sound like sarcasm. A poem might be read as criticism. Even silence can be dangerous. Was it respectful, or was it sulking? You walk each corridor as if stepping over invisible traps. And yet, somehow, laughter bubbles through the halls. Women still trade jokes in whispers, still sneak glances of mischief during rituals. It's survival, too, finding light in the cracks. Joke 2 slips out as you fold your sleeves neatly. If paranoia burned calories, I'd be thinner than rice paper. As you lie in bed that night, staring at the shadows dancing on your curtain, you realize how fragile everything feels. Rank, favor, beauty, each can vanish with a whisper. The palace isn't just a cage, it's a maze lined with invisible blades. Joke 3 drifts as you close your eyes, heart still racing. Forget ghosts. What really haunts this place are jealous glances with better hairpins. And so you sleep lightly, ready for dawn to bring another test you didn't sign up for. The morning bell tolls again, but today its echo feels heavier. You know why. Whispers have circled for weeks, and now the rumor proves true: one of the concubines is expecting a child. In this world, motherhood is both blessing and battlefield. Mainstream fact: in the imperial harem, bearing an heir was the surest path to security and rank. A son, especially, could elevate a concubine to new titles, wealth, and influence. Yet, it also drew jealousy like moths to flame. Historians still argue whether pregnancies brought genuine protection or greater danger, since rival factions might conspire against both mother and child. You join the others at morning roll, noting the careful smiles masking sharp eyes. The pregnant woman is escorted with special care, her meals supervised by physicians, her quarters guarded. Quirky tidbit: palace doctors prescribed elaborate regimens for expectant mothers, bird's nest soups, ginseng tonics, jade amulets tied at the waist, all thought to nurture the child and ward off misfortune. In her shadow, you see the double edge. Some women beam with congratulations, offering gifts of embroidery stitched with cranes for longevity. Others mutter too sweetly, their envy biting through the silk. Joke 1 floats in your mind: if side eyes could cause miscarriages, half the palace would already be childless. When the physician checks pulses that afternoon, his presence feels heavier than usual. He prescribes cooling teas, instructs the maids to monitor even the sound of music in the mother's quarters. Too much noise, he warns, could upset the child's spirit. Mainstream fact again: pregnancy taboos filled medical texts, certain foods, colors, or even stories were avoided. Historians still argue whether these rules were rooted in genuine care or superstition, but their enforcement was relentless. Wet nurses, already on retainer, prepare for service. Tutors are whispered about for the child's future education. You catch yourself daydreaming: what if it were you? A child could secure your place, protect you against rivals, even carve your name into history. Then reality returns: you see the empress's narrowed gaze, and you remember that a child also creates targets. Quirky tidbit again: records mention rival concubines sending subtle gifts, like overly rich food, to pregnant women, knowing indulgence could harm. Maids and eunuchs became shields as much as servants. You think about your own attendants and wonder which of them you trust with your life. By evening, talk of the pregnancy has infected every corner of the palace. Poets compose verses about auspicious omens, cranes circling, lotuses blooming at dawn. Skeptics roll their eyes. Joke 2 slips out as you sip your herbal tea: if every blooming flower meant a baby, we'd have enough heirs to start a sports league. As you settle onto your bed, the thought lingers. Motherhood here is less about family and more about legacy. A child means survival, maybe even power, but also peril sharpened to a knife's edge. You whisper joke 3 into the dark: maybe the safest strategy is just to stay single. Not that anyone asked us. The palace sleeps, but its dreams tonight are filled with the cries of imagined heirs. Dawn mists curl over the tiled roofs, and the palace stirs with smoke from incense burners. Today is not drills or dances, it's prayers, because even inside these walls where rules crush every breath, hope still leans toward the heavens. Mainstream fact: religion and ritual were woven into palace life. Concubines offered incense to Guanyin, the bodhisattva of compassion, prayed at ancestral altars, or consulted Buddhist and Taoist monks brought inside for festivals. Historians still argue whether these practices reflected genuine faith or political display, but to the women kneeling on cold stone floors, prayer was one of the few acts that felt personal. You shuffle into the temple hall. Sleeves brushing the ground, hands folded around a stick of incense. The air is thick with sandalwood, bells echo softly, and rows of statues gleam in candlelight. You bow, light your incense, and whisper petitions you dare not speak aloud to anyone else. Quirky tidbit: some concubines even recorded their dreams, believing them messages from spirits or ancestors, and submitted them to interpreters for guidance. You glance at last night's dream: crows on the roof, and wonder nervously what omen that would be. Nearby, women drop coins into offering bowls, each clink a silent wish. One prays for favor, another for health, another for a child. You close your eyes and pray for survival, not the most poetic, but perhaps the most realistic. Joke 1 drifts in your thoughts: if Guanyin answered every concubine's prayer, even the emperor wouldn't have enough dumplings to go around. Later, a Taoist priest draws lots from a bamboo cup, reading fortunes with solemn gravity. Yours says patience will bear fruit. You hide a smirk. Patience here feels like an endless meal of plain porridge. Mainstream fact again, divination was common in the courts, shaping decisions from personal matters to political campaigns. Historians still argue whether rulers genuinely believed or simply used omens to justify choices already made. Back in your quarters, you copy sutras onto paper, brushstrokes slow and meditative. Quirky tidbit again, some women donated entire handwritten sutras to temples, hoping merit would protect them. You pause mid-stroke and think joke too, if calligraphy really builds good karma, I should already be a saint. At night, you burn paper charms under the moon, the smoke rising like whispered secrets. The flicker of flames feels calming, even as eunuchs patrol nearby, making sure no unapproved rituals are performed. You wonder if faith itself is another performance, or if in these quiet acts something genuine still breathes. You crawl into bed, the scent of sandalwood clinging to your sleeves, and feel lighter somehow. Maybe prayer is survival too, not because it changes the world, but because it softens the edges of waiting. Joke 3 floats as you drift toward sleep. If patience really does bear fruit, I hope mine's a peach and not another bowl of boiled cabbage. The palace walls rise around you like mountains, but even mountains erode with time. Service here doesn't last forever. Eventually, every concubine must face what comes after. You watch older women fade into quieter corners, their names slipping down the jade plaques until they vanish from the daily registers. Retirement, if it comes, is both an escape and a haunting. Mainstream fact, concubines who outlived their years of favor might be sent to estates, released to their families, or moved into convents. Others remained in the palace, living out their days in seclusion. Historians still argue whether these retirements were merciful gestures or veiled exiles meant to remove potential threats. But either way, few women simply left untouched. You walk the garden paths with an elder consort who speaks softly of the past. She recalls when she was summoned nightly, her robes heavy with jewels. Now, her hair silvering, she tends chrysanthemums instead of politics. Quirky tidbit, some retired concubines became Buddhist nuns, their heads shaved, their days filled with chants rather than jade hairpins. Imagine trading gossip for sutras, silks for plain robes. You picture it and almost sigh with relief, yet legends tell of others who seized the afterlife differently, immortalized in plays, poems, even cautionary tales. A woman who bore a powerful prince might be remembered as mother of the emperor. Another, accused of jealousy, might be painted forever as a villainess. Joke 1 flickers as you glance at the storyteller eunuch in the courtyard. Great, I'm basically auditioning to become either a saint or a soap opera villain. You sit under lantern light, writing verses in a scroll. Perhaps your words will survive, perhaps not. But you imagine future generations reading them, piecing together the truth behind silks and incense. Mainstream fact again, chronicles often rewrote concubine stories, bending them to moral lessons. Historians still argue whether those accounts reflect real women or just archetypes of virtue and vice. One night, you dream of leaving the palace walls. Maybe you retire to a quiet estate, sipping tea among willows. Maybe you shave your head and chant sutras in a temple far away. Or maybe, like so many, you remain behind these walls until your last breath. Quirky tidbit again, in some dynasties, concubines of deceased emperors were sealed inside tomb complexes, expected to accompany him in death. You shudder, hoping your fate isn't carved in stone that literally, as you wake, you realize the palace will go on. Swallowing names and spitting out legends. Whether you are remembered as clever, jealous, kind, or invisible is not entirely in your hands. Joke 2 slips into your sigh. At this rate, I'll just be remembered as that one who always complained about porridge. Still, in small acts, embroidered verses, whispered prayers, the kindness you show your maid, you leave threads of yourself. Perhaps they'll survive, perhaps not. But they are yours. Joke 3 drifts as you rest your head. Maybe the best retirement plan here is just reincarnation. Now, let the palace walls fade into mist. Picture the courtyards empty, lanterns extinguished, incense smoke thinning into the cool night air. The rustle of silk sleeves, the shuffle of eunuch sandals, even the whispers of rivalry, all dissolve into silence. What remains is only you, your breath, and the gentle rhythm of time passing. Breathe in slowly, as though you can still smell sandalwood and chrysanthemums. Hold it lightly, then breathe out, letting go of the jade plaques, the rules, the endless routines. Feel your shoulders soften, as though the heavy embroidered robes have slipped away. With each exhale, you are lighter, freer. Imagine yourself walking through a garden at twilight. Bamboo bends in the breeze, koi ripple the water, and a paper lantern drifts gently across a pond, carrying your worries away. The palace is distant now, a story behind you, while the night sky above glows wide and forgiving, your steps slow. The air is calm. Even the watchful eyes of history have closed. You are safe, not judged, not measured, simply resting. Let your body sink deeper into comfort, like settling onto a soft bed after a long day. The sounds fade into a hush, the kind that wraps you like a blanket. If memories of rivalry or fear return, let them dissolve like smoke. If images of silks and ceremonies arise, let them drift by like clouds. Tonight, you need nothing but peace. The stars above stretch eternal, steady and bright, reminding you that beyond walls and rules, there is always a wider world, a gentler rhythm, waiting for you. Let your breath slow, your body sink, your eyes close. Sleep finds you now, softly, completely.